in the health profession, either as a physician or a physician scientist. There's just so many opportunities to be had out there. You also need to know that as you embark on this journey, it is going to be, if you haven't thought about it already, a huge commitment in both time and possibly resources, that is money. So what I hope to do today is share a little bit of information about things that you need to be thinking about. And I've chosen to use the Association of American Medical Colleges, the AAMC's PowerPoint presentation on financing medical education. I think it covers a lot of the important topics that you need to start thinking about. So this is paying for medical school education. And please, as I mentioned earlier, if any of you have questions, just please shoot up your hands and I'll be glad to entertain the question as we go through this. So where to start? Know the cost, understand the financial aid options, manage your money wisely, and getting support along the way. You might think that all schools are similar and in terms of they all provide an excellent medical education. But some of you may think, well, I can't afford to go to a private school because it's too expensive. I should go to a state school. And that really is a fallacy that is really not true. You need to know what to look for. Private is not better and public is not cheaper. And you need to educate yourself on knowing the cost of the schools that you are considering. So think about, you know, do I want to go out of state? Do I want to go to a research-intensive medical school? Am I willing to travel across country, et cetera? So educate yourself about the cost, the tuition, the living expenses, books and supplies, et cetera. How much is it going to cost me to get a Stanford education? What is the cost going to be? Can I afford it if that's my number one choice? Here's a sample of the costs of attending both public and private schools, 2011-12. This is a first year budget. So this is just 1 year. So multiply this by 4 and you get the cost of attendance. So as you can see, going to a public school can approximate $200,000 and going to a private school would be $250,000. That's a hefty investment if you have to pay for it on your own dime. So again, this represents that the public is maybe a little less expensive than the private school, but you know, this can be misconceiving. Know the cost. This is the average cost, the debt of students that graduated in 2011. Private schools a little bit higher than public. The average is $162,000. About 9 out of 10 students borrow. So if you're going to go to medical school, you most likely will be one of the 90%, or one of the 9 out of 10. Debt, educational loans is pretty much a given if you're going to medical school. So you're saying to yourself, $162,000 debt, how the heck am I going to pay that when I'm a resident making so little money? Just to show you that it is doable, this is a sample of what somebody who is going into residency, what they would be earning and how they would use their earnings to pay for not only their living expenses but to service their educational loans. This particular person had, excuse me, $168,000 in debt. So we will have a monthly payment of $2,500. 22% of their monthly budget will go into servicing their debt. But you know, they rent and mortgage, and they have you know, time discretionary income, some money set aside for savings, etc. So it is very doable. You know, it just depends on what your plan is. But the important thing is have a plan. You can't go into it blindly saying, I will be a physician one day, I'm not going to worry about debt. You know, make good decisions now and it'll help you along the way. So you're thinking, well, maybe I won't go to medical school. Maybe I'll just get my bachelor's degree, go into accounting and just start earning money now. You know, I don't want to be in debt forever, so I'm just going to finish my bachelor's and go on with my life. Well, this is just an example of foregoing an MD degree. If you go get your bachelor's degree, start working, 3.5% interest salary increase per year. You work through 65 years, 44 years. Your savings at the age of 65 when you retire is 1.4 million. Even though you start working later as an MD, by the time you retire, your savings is potentially twice as much. So again, this is just earnings potential that you have as a physician. So what we want to illustrate here is that it's an investment that you need to be aware of and consider as such. So this is some samples of earnings. Anesthesiologists, surgeons, of course, highly specialized, require a longer training period. but also because of the specialty will pay you more. Pediatrics, family practice, primary care still seem to be at the bottom. Hopefully those numbers will be coming up in the future years. But certainly with this type of income, you can easily service your educational debt. There's also costs that you need to think of beforehand because applying to medical school is not, it's not cost-free or it's not free. You need to prepare for and take the MCAT. You need to apply to the medical schools through the AMCAS application. Many schools, if they offer you an interview, will have you complete a secondary application, which could be $50, $100. Let's say you're applying to 20 medical schools because you want to get in to, or more. $100 times 20 is $2,000. That's money that you need to plan for and save ahead of time. There are different variable costs that you also need to consider. The MCAT Prep MSAR book, if you're not familiar with it, it is a summary of all the school's information. If you are shopping for a school, I mean, as an undergraduate, some of you may have decided to go to one school versus another, or your parents did, or it really depends on the individual. But the MSAR provides very valuable information about, the size of the school, the professor-to-student ratio, the research dollars available, the cost, the average debt, etc. If you, you should be an informed consumer. You should do your homework, and schools that you are interested in or have programs that you're interested in, you should really look at the MSAR and educate yourself and see if it's a good fit for you. There's also costs associated with interviewing. If you're traveling across the country to interview at schools, you need not only to buy interview outfit, you also need to pay for airline, housing, etc. So, there's all these variable costs. If you're applying only in California, it might be a little cheaper, but if you decide to go East Coast or Midwest someplace, then those expenses will also be something that you need to plan and save for ahead of time. Certainly don't want to get any of these expenses on credit card. That's not a good idea. And then, of course, moving expenses. Should you decide to go cross country, then you also need to make arrangements to have your things shipped. So again, these are just samples of variable costs that you should consider up front. So we're here to talk about financial aid, and I basically want to say that if you can get into medical school, you can get financial aid to pay for it. And but there's different types of financial aid. There are scholarships, which are usually in the forms of merit or need-based, and there are also loans. So for federal loans, which we'll cover in detail, you do need to be a U.S. citizen or resident, U.S. citizen or permanent resident, and that's for all federal aid. Institutional aid, it really varies. I'll give you an example. At Stanford, we do require U.S. citizenship and residency for institutional aid, and we provide not only scholarship, but it's need-based. We do not offer merit scholarships, because we feel that everybody that we admit to Stanford is meritorious. So, but we also offer loans. So grants and loans, again, institutional specific. So as you say, well, I'm not going to, I'm going to exclude even looking at the high cost schools, the private schools. The sticker price is too high. Well, I'll give you an example of why that's a fallacy. At Stanford, we have, our program is need-based. You saw the average indebtedness was $162,000. At Stanford, our average indebtedness for the graduates this last 2012 was $100,000. So we maintain our debt levels low, and it's because we're a private school, but we have an endowment, and we use that money to offset educational expenses. So as you shop for medical schools, you want to make sure that you know what type of financial aid is available, merit or need-based scholarship. Ask what the average indebtedness is, and then do a little bit of homework and find out, based on your own background and resources, what might your indebtedness be. So very important things that for you to start thinking about right now. I mentioned federal student loans. There are 5 loans available. The Stafford unsubsidized loan, the subsidized loan, which used to be $8,500 per year, has gone away. It is no longer available to graduate and professional students. You do have eligibility for an unsubsidized Stafford loan, aggregate annual amount of $40,500. The Plus loan is a grad plus loan available to you, and that's credit worthiness. So you need to make sure that if you're going to take out a grad plus loan, you have a good credit score. The Perkins loan is a federal loan, 0% in school, 5% in repayment. Not all schools have it, but if they do, it's a good loan because it's fully subsidized, $8,000 maximum per year. Schools that have it, it's a matching program, so schools are required to put into the program, the government matches it. So we have it at Stanford, $8,000 per year, but not all schools offer it, as I mentioned. Loans for disadvantaged students, it's a Title VII program. Again, not all schools have availability. And the primary care loan, those loans are low interest subsidized loans available to students going into primary care, pediatrics, family medicine, etc. Other sources of aid, family, of course. Everybody's going to help finance that doctor in the family, right? But you know, you need to have that conversation with your family. Say, you know, I'm seriously thinking about pursuing a career in medicine. I want to be a physician, and you know, it's going to be an investment in both time and money. And can you help? I really encourage you to have that frank discussion with family members because you'd be surprised how many would be willing to help. $500, $1,000 there, it really adds up. And there's also service-based and outside scholarships. There's really very few scholarships for medical schools. There's not really a lot of, I guess, private foundations, if you will, that fund medical schools. We do have one that I like to advertise. It's the Paul and Daisy Soros Foundation for New Americans. That's if your parents and yourself are a first-generation U.S. citizen or permanent resident. It pays $45,000 for 2 years, so it's $90,000. And it's pdsoros.org. is the Paul and Daisy Soros Foundation for New Americans. It's pdsoros.org. P as in Paul, D as in Daisy, SOROS.org. Excellent source of funding if you can get it. It's a competitive program, but I've seen many students actually receive it at our institution. So, you know, you need to start looking at what outside scholarships are available. There are web-based scholarship search engines. A lot of them are for undergrad. I would suggest either going to, like our school has a outside scholarship opportunity database that you can just, it's public, so you can go there and see what types of scholarships are available. You know, you might want to, there's some faith-based scholarships. Jewish Federation, I think, has a scholarship. So, you know, you need to think outside the box. It's not necessarily medically related that's going to have these scholarships. And service-based, again, is the armed services. I don't know, did anybody visit the armed services tables out there? You know, that's a great opportunity if you want to serve your country and you want to get out of medical school with very little debt. It might be a good fit for you. You know, the armed services hires obstetricians. They have Army, you know, officers that are women, and they have spouses, etc. So, you know, think a little bit outside the box. I think that's a great opportunity for those of you who you know, would like to graduate with little debt and again have a opportunity to serve your country.
Question.
Yes.
Is there any branch of the armed forces that you recommend better than the other?
No. I think they're all wonderful.
I mean, they all offer different stuff, I know for sure.
They all offer different, and you know, their repayment programs are different. Some have scholarships up front where you sign on as a commissioned officer. Others have loan repayment where you go to medical school and then sign up, and then you serve, and they do loan repayment after the fact. National Health Service Corps, again, is another one where you work in primary care. You can get funded 4 years, or they have a loan repayment program. So after you finish and you apply, you go into a medically underserved area and work, you know, serving the community, and that's also another opportunity. There are also state and city, well, state mostly, loan forgiveness programs. So let's say we have a state like, I'll just use Arkansas. I don't even know if it's true or not, but let's say Arkansas has a rural community that doesn't have enough physicians. And so if you go and work as a family medicine doctor there, they'll repay your loans. So, you know, those type of opportunities exist, and just depends on how much you want to be in control of your life for that period of time. Yes?
Are there many of those opportunities out there?
There is actually on the AAMC website, which if you haven't perused through this, you really do need to, because there is a loan forgiveness database that the AAMC maintains, and it's state-based. So there are quite a few, actually. You know, not for everybody, but it's important that you know that there are options. I think that's the important thing that we want to share here, is that there's many different options that you need to start thinking about. Yes?
Is the PLUS loan the only one that checks your credit, or is it all the loans that will do a credit
It's the
check?
federal PLUS loan that is credit-based. The federal unsubsidized, I've never ran across this, but I've never had an unsubsidized rejected because of a credit score, because it's not credit-based. But the Grad PLUS is. Okay. So again, financial aid officers, either your undergraduate or medical school, we're your best friends. We have all the information. So don't be afraid to approach us and ask for information. Really, that's what we are all about. We're about educating you, sharing our resources, sharing information. The application deadline, as you apply to medical school, and let's say you have multiple offers, you want to make sure that you and your parents prepare your federal income taxes early as possible, especially in your first year. Because if you have multiple offers and a financial aid offer from a school is going to be the determining factor, you want to get that information sooner versus later. You have a May 15th deadline to accept a medical school, so that's going to be an important information for you to have, so you can make an informed decision. Yes?
If you're an independent and you're filling out your FAFSA, do you still have to give your parents information?
It's really school specific, so I'll give you an example of what we do at Stanford is that students for federal financial aid are independent. You don't put parental data on there. For institutional aid, we want your parents' information because we do have limited resources. We do have a large endowment, yet it's targeted at need-based students. That's our philosophy. So we want to measure the family's ability to pay, not necessarily their willingness, their ability to pay. So that gives us the ability to level the playing field, if you will, for students that come from families with no resources versus those that do have resources. And we do make an exception that if you're over 30, then we exclude parental resources. So it's really school specific. It's really school specific. So, you know, but one thing is that schools don't negotiate. You say, I really want to come to Stanford, but Duke gave me a better offer or whatever. You just say, we don't negotiate. It is what it is. You know, this is what we're able to offer. We're not going to make you a better offer for you to come here. Schools don't do that.
Question.
Yes.
The only exception to that rule about the parents' financial stuff, it's if you're 30 and over.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if you're married.
If you're married, then we want your spouse's income in
Okay.
addition. So,
Okay,
yeah.
in addition to.
So,
Okay.
so again, financial aid is, we provide financial aid or offer financial aid to the extent that you're unable to help yourself. So it doesn't replace your own resources. It basically fills in the gap. That's what financial aid does. Yes?
About the married and your parents' info, is that just for institutional aid?
Yes.
Okay, so that
Yes, for federal aid, you're independent. The federal government doesn't care about mom and dad. They want to see what your need is. And so if you've had summer savings, they're going to say, oh, you have $20,000 in savings, you should be using that for your education. Well, that's okay, because you know what? It would be loans anyway. So you're just deferring those loans until a later date. That's a good thing. Okay. You don't make money in medical school, though, is that every penny counts. We know where all the money is hidden. And back again to research and apply for outside scholarships. I mentioned our database on our Stanford website. You know, under financial aid, it's an external funding database, and also UCLA has a wonderful one called Pennies from Heaven. Very similar, but you know, it might be a little bit different because they have things that are specific to Southern California. We might have things that are specific to Northern California. So, again, be aware of those resources that are available. Again, once you are in medical school, it's important for you to keep track of your expenses and organize. Again, have a plan. Very important for you to understand the costs and write down what your budget is going to be. And the MedLoans Organizer's Calculator and their first program is just a wonderful resource for you to start educating yourself. There's some mini podcasts there to talk you through how to develop a budget if you haven't had that experience. And again, would ask you to just spend a little time on that. Repayment assistance and forgiveness programs. I mentioned some of these. NIH loan repayment program. Those, if you go into academic or scientific medicine, they have a loan repayment program. National Health Service Corps repayment program, public service loan forgiveness. This is fairly new, the public service loan forgiveness program. It's for students or graduates that you graduate, let's say, with $180,000 worth of debt, and you're working in a nonprofit, and you're making your monthly student loan payments, and you pay it for 10 years, 120 payments, and any principal and interest left over at the end of 120 payments is forgiven. This is a fairly new program. This is in 4th year of existence, so nobody's had anything forgiven yet. But we're hopeful that it will stick around. I think it's a great opportunity for those individuals that are working in nonprofits. Again, it's encouraging people to work in nonprofits, and it doesn't have to be medicine either. So if you end up doing something other than a practicing physician, but as long as you're working in a nonprofit, you qualify for this public service loan forgiveness. You want to learn a little bit more, the ibrinfo.org is very good. They actually have a calculator that you can plug numbers in, and it'll show you year to year what your payments would be. Talked a little bit about managing your money wisely. Again, back to the first is financial information resources for students. This is, again, a AAMC. Lots of handouts, interactive information about financing. Financing your education, but also living within your means while a medical student. So again, have a realistic spending plan, put it in writing, you know, identify it for leaks, you know, oops, I didn't mean to spend $200 on that pair of boots. Make necessary adjustments as you go along. You know, live like a student while you're a student. You know, you'll have ample time to reap the rewards of your investment later. You know, the spending leaks, just an example of, you know, I have to have my Starbucks every day, you know, so $125 per month, 10 months, $1,200 per year. Over the course of your 4 years in medical school, that's $5,000. But if you were to make your own coffee, $8 per month, $336 a year. Cost of coffee beans, $13.44 plus water. So the savings there would be, and I didn't give it, but the savings over time would be $36.56. So, I mean, just little things like that, but actually it's the eating out that really gets students in trouble, because, you know, they'll say, I don't have time to cook, I'm just going to grab something real fast, you know, but a sandwich, $5 versus making a sandwich at PB&J or something, just, you know, you'd be surprised how quickly that adds up. Of course, these are just practical things. Buy groceries instead of eating out. Brew your own coffee. Kids meal, no, just kidding. You know, look for those value options. You know, rent movies at take movies out of the public library versus paying for them or paying for cable. I saw a cable bill on one of our students' bills the other day, and it was $72 per month for cable. It's like, what are you thinking? It's like, you know, you got to get rid of that. And again, say no to eating out, Starbucks or Pete's, whichever your preference. Weekly trips to the movies, vacations, you know, really doesn't happen at medical school. There are service learning opportunities, but they're not really vacations. And credit card offers, really avoid credit cards if at all possible. And of course, you know, brewing coffee, we rehashed that. Roommates, sharing living expenses is always a great way of saving money. PB&J, I like those. You know, borrowing videos and DVDs from the library, and any relative offering money, just say yes. You know, you'd be surprised how many aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. It's like, you know, you're working hard, you're going to medical school, you're doing a good thing, so we're going to help you out. And of course, you know, it's not all doom and gloom. You know, you need to go out and have a good time, enjoy yourself every now and then. It's just fine. And credit cards. Are they bad? Well, they can be. Let's say you're given a $5,000 credit card with an 18% interest rate, and you max it out, and you say, oh, I'm on a fixed med school budget, I can only make the minimum payment. Well, if you did that, you took 23 years to repay, which is making the minimum payments, $7,000 would be interest alone. You'd be paying $12,000 on that $5,000. So, you know, think twice about it. And certainly, if you have any credit card debt or any type of personal debt before you come to medical school, pay it off, because you're going to be living on a fixed budget, and you don't have that discretionary money to pay those down. And check your credit report. Again, not only for the Grad Plus loan, but identity theft is prevalent. So you want to make sure that your credit score, it's free. You know, go out there and take advantage of it. Make sure that your behaviors are such that you're establishing a good credit score. If you do need a Grad Plus loan, you'll be in good shape. This little information how that is ranked. And to improve your credit score, if your score is low, make sure you pay your bills on time, pay down debt and lines of credit, and apply for new credit. So don't apply for new credit cards, even if the interest rate or a teaser rate 0% for 6 months or what have you. Those only increase your liability, if you will, because you have access to more money, to more credit money. So to get started, an investment in knowledge always pays the best interest, of course, Ben Franklin. And just, of course, the amount of support that you have along the way, there's just not only the AAMC organizations. If you know any medical students, reach out to them. They are more than happy to share their experiences, their mistakes, what works for them, what doesn't. It's just they're wonderful resources. Yes, they're busy, but they'll spend time with you. Medical school advisors, pre-med counselors, wonderful resource. The Organization of Student Representatives through the OSR of AAMC. Again, touting First for Medical Education on the AAMC website, Careers in Medicine, and of course your friends and family. So I hope that was helpful, and I'll be glad to talk a little bit about loans. If you'd like, maybe about the federal loan programs and the interest rates and what you do when you're in school and how long you have to repay them and such. Would that be helpful? Okay. All right. So, as I mentioned earlier, the federal loans, they're all through the direct loan program now. There are no federally guaranteed student loans. They're all through the Department of Education. And this year, beginning July 1st of this past year, the subsidized Stafford loan for graduate and professional students went away. So that means that the $8,500 that was available is no longer available. And for medical, for grad professionals and students, only unsubsidized loans are available. The unsubsidized loan has an aggregate annual amount of $40,500, and the Grad Plus loan is pay the difference between that loan and the cost of attendance. So if you needed to borrow the full amount and you had a good credit score for the Grad Plus, you certainly could. So financing a medical education is possible even if it's only with loans. So I just want to make that point. The unsubsidized Stafford loan has a current interest rate of 6.8%. It's fixed. It's unsubsidized, but it is fixed. That means it's accruing interest as you're in school. When you graduate and you enter repayment, that interest is added to your principal, and it's called capitalization. So when you enter repayment, now you're paying interest on your interest. So one strategy might be to try and pay as much of that interest. If you have some discretionary, you'll be able to live a little bit below budget, try to pay some of that interest off while you're in school. That'll minimize your total debt. Unless you're going into a loan repayment or forgiveness program, then that might not be as important. The Grad Plus loan is a higher interest rate. It's also unsubsidized, 7.9%. And again, it accrues interest, capitalization. When you graduate from medical school, you have a 6-month grace period before you have to start paying. So you start residency, and then, January the following year, you have to start making payments. But there are some loan repayment options. Income-based, it's income-sensitive. You can do extended instead of a 10-year standard repayment. You could push that out to 25 years. You can do forbearance, meaning you don't have to pay anything, but interest will continue to accrue. So, and that you have to apply for annually. So there are options available that you need to start thinking about, but in all likelihood, I don't think that there's very many students that actually borrow the full amount for medical school. They get some source of financial aid, either through outside grant or scholarship. But you need to start thinking about, when you're looking at schools, what type of aid you might be eligible for, because that might be the most important factor for you. Okay. Any other questions?
If, let's say that you want to get one of those loans, the federal loans, would it matter if you already have a huge loan, like such a mortgage loan on your...
No, because these are educational loans. So your private loan doesn't matter as far as your unsubsidized, depending on what the status is for your Grad Plus. It might, but if you're in good credit, you've got a good FICO score and your credit is good, then there shouldn't be a problem, because that one is credit based. But it doesn't take into account your, your mortgage, or if you did have, $100,000 in credit out there, credit card, soft debt, that might be a different story. Yes?
If you set up a good plan to repay your loans, what would be a good time span that you would be able to repay it?
Well, really, there's a lot of variables there, because it's the amount of the loan, it's the specialty that you're going into. So if you're going into let's say you decide to go into neurosurgery, pays very well, of course, or anesthesia, close to $300,000. And but your residency, it's a long residency. It's a 7-year residency to get anesthesia. So you're actually not working as an anesthesiologist until you're 8 years out of school. So, but let's say you're going to make income-based, or income sensitive. So it's going to be a % of your income to debt, and then they cap that amount. So you can say, well, I'm going to pay, my monthly payments based on 10 years, and then when I get my anesthesiologist salary, I'm going to just pay the lump sum off. You can do that. You can do that. So it really depends. It depends if you're going into a highly paid specialty or a general practice. And depends on, you're working for a nonprofit or you're working for a profit. There's a lot of variables involved there. But go to this MedLoans calculator, and you could actually plug in the numbers there and play with it. Say, I figure I'm going to get $168,000 in debt. Just put in a loan, create a profile for yourself. It's free. You just need to use username and login. Create a unsubsidized loan for $168,000 and plug in, I want to do a 10-year standard repayment. You saw some of those numbers for what starting residence salary is going to be. Plug those numbers in, and it'll tell you, 10 years, how much principal and interest will I have paid down? Or at this rate, how long will it take for me to pay down? If I want to make, let's say, $200 above the minimum every month, how long is that going to take me? So it's a really great interactive calculator that can help you get your head around the numbers and actually make some plans, in case you wanted to start a family or buy a home, start a practice, etc. So it's important for you to look at that. Yes?
What's the average monthly payment that medical students usually pay after they get out of med school, minimum?
Depends. It depends on the debt level. I've seen it as low as $400. I've seen it as high as $1,600. But it's usually capped at, it's a debt to income. So it's usually capped. And most students that get into that $1,600, because you're not going to be able to pay that on a resident salary, they'll go into an extended program. And that'll lower the monthly payments. It's like a mortgage, if you will. If you get a 10-year mortgage, your payments are a little bit higher, but you pay it off in 10 years. You get a 30-year, they're much more manageable, but then you're servicing that mortgage for 30 years, so it's a trade-off. Come on, more questions? Yes?
We do have 2 questions from the Twitter feed.
Yes.
The first of which, you mentioned about the average debt load for a student. What is the average bill for the entire med school program?
Say again?
What is the average tuition bill for the entire med school program? Greatly varies, I know.
It does vary. We had the average, so you had tuition and fees. So we had the public and private. I think I said for private average, it was about $250,000. And for an average public, it was close to $200,000. That's tuition and fees. So tuition and fees are usually fixed. They're non-negotiable unless you get a scholarship that waives those fees. The living expenses, which is your, living, food, personal expenses, transportation, books and supplies, those are variable. So those are things that you have control over, buying used books versus new, biking to school versus, filling up at, what is it now, $3.58 a gallon, or that could rack up pretty quickly. So it's those types of decisions, those type of choices that help minimize that overall cost.
All of our international viewers are asking about international financial aid. You mentioned residency requirements
for federal aid. So again, it's institution specific. So again, as our institution, we do not provide need-based financial aid for international students. They need to show proof of funding in order. They can be admitted. That's certainly, it's need blind, but they have to, in order for them to get an F1 visa, they have to show proof of funding. And most institutions follow those same guidelines. There are some schools that do provide financial aid for international students. Again, it's case by case. It's mostly, well, public definitely don't, but private schools. So you'd be looking like Cornell, Yale, Johns Hopkins, those that are private.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
I have a Stanford question, I guess. One of the biggest hindrances to me thinking about Stanford is the cost of living. Where do most of the students live? Are the
First year students usually live on campus, and then I see them migrate off into houses. So they rent a house, and for 3-4 bedrooms, 4 or 5 people. That seems to be what they do. So they minimize the cost by sharing the monthly rent. Could be expensive, but just depends on what type of financial aid package you get as well, because you're paying. If you are a high need student, and you get maximum Stanford grant, tuition is, let's say, about close to $16,000 a quarter. To multiply that by 3 or 4 quarters, it's a quarter-based school, but you get $11,000 in grant to offset that. Then tuition is only $5,000. So it's then the price tag doesn't seem as daunting as if you're looking at no help with that tuition whatsoever. So.
Do you have family housing on
Yes.
campus?
Family housing on campus. It's actually pretty nice. You're welcome.